I don't know whether you ever imagined we would see the kind of demand for bandwidth in this country that we're seeing under your tenure. But what kinds of moves are necessary and possible? And how would you gauge right now the ability of the bandwidth to handle the kinds of things we're doing right now?
Well, great questions. A few weeks ago, when we realized that millions of Americans were going to be transitioning back home, working from home, educating their kids at home and the like, we recognized that it was critical for America's broadband providers to step up to the plate. And so I asked them to sign my Keep Americans Connected pledge. That pledge includes three parts: not cutting off service for any consumers who are unable to pay their bills due to disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic, as well as for small businesses as well. Secondly, waiving any late fees that may be incurred. And third, opening up their hotspots, their Wi-Fi hotspots. Thus far, over 650 broadband providers covering the vast majority of American consumers have taken that pledge. So I'm proud to say that those consumers remain connected to be able to do the things they need to do with broadband. Some of those providers have gone even further, lifting data caps, increasing speeds without charge, offering low-income consumers specialized services and the like. Even going beyond that, however, we've made sure we pull out the stops to ensure that broadband connectivity is going to be there. As you might know, the president signed the CARES Act last Friday. I put out a plan executing the $200 million telehealth authority that Congress gave us on Monday. And on Tuesday, the FCC approved my plan. So we've got a major new telehealth initiative to help those heroic healthcare providers and the patients out in the countryside who might not be able to go to a bricks and mortar facility get the care they need. But bottom line is, we're doing everything we can to make sure that broadband is there in every facet of Americans' daily lives, disrupted as they are.
Where would you say the strain is, if there is strain right now? Is it urban? Is it rural? And how can you explain to viewers how easy it is to add capacity in areas where you are seeing the system get stretched?
Those are a lot of key points. In fact, just yesterday, I held a conference call with all of the nation's major broadband providers, as well as the trade associations representing over 1,000 of those broadband providers. They told me the network capacity the network usage has increased about 20 to 35%, depending on the part of the country and the time of day. Interestingly, a lot of the usage, as you might expect, has migrated from urban areas to suburban and rural areas where people tend to reside. And one of the things that's interesting is network capacity has also scaled to meet that demand. Overall, the message I got from the broadband providers is that they architect their network in order to handle the peak expected traffic. So thus far, even though the usage has gone up, the network has plenty of capacity to deal with that. And so we're monitoring that carefully, both on the wired and wireless side, to make sure that that continues to be the case. But thus far, I'm proud to say that the American broadband economy has been very, very strong, which has been a linchpin, as you know, for many American families.
Yeah, that is good news. Chairman, it's John Fort. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Last week we had on Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel, and she had an interesting suggestion that sounds great to me, and that is a national report on broadband performance, particularly during crises like these, so the public can see in detail how broadband is performing and perhaps understand broadband better as an essential service for the economy during times like this. Are you behind that idea?
Well, we certainly want to know what the state of the network is, and that's why I've been constantly in contact, including just yesterday, as I mentioned, with these broadband providers. They are the ones, of course, who own and operate these networks. They are the ones who have the most insight. And in fact, you can go right now to the websites of many of the trade associations, cable trade association, telephone companies, et cetera, that have websites where you can monitor the network performance. For example, the cable one includes a state-by-state analysis of how the networks are holding up. So by and large, I'm proud to say that the broadband economy, again, has been very, very strong. We're going to continue to monitor that going forward. And in the meantime, we're going to do more, as much as we can within our authority, to increase the capacity of those, including by making a lot more Wi-Fi spectrum available, which is critical for American consumers right now.
Chairman Pai, I'm glad you just brought that up, because given the fact that you are moving to make some changes in terms of that allocation of public airwaves to increase Wi-Fi speeds right now, a proposal that you're expected to vote on later this month. There's proponents of it, there's critics of it, and I think it just raises the question with all of the spectrum that is currently in play and that the FCC is currently analyzing right now, is how you determine who gets what.
That's a great question, and it's always a challenge because there is very little greenfield spectrum these days. Everybody has a use of some part of the spectrum or the other, but in particular, this 6 gigahertz band, which I propose now to make available for Wi-Fi, has been described as one of the biggest breakthroughs in Wi-Fi, if not wireless, period, in a generation. And the reason is that consumers are increasingly relying on it. Right now, I'm relying on Wi-Fi in order to do this interview, and I'm sure many of you are out there as well. Many of our viewers might be as well. So by making the spectrum available for Wi-Fi while protecting the incumbent users, electric utilities, broadcasters, and the like, we're able to have the best of both worlds. Consumers can continue to enjoy Wi-Fi, and we can also protect some of those important incumbent uses. Here, as I've always said, our decisions at the FCC are driven not by politics or press releases, but by the physics. And so I sat down with our engineers and very carefully went over the technical details of this to make sure that we are doing the right thing. This is in the public interest, and we're very confident we'll have a unanimous vote in a few weeks.
Chair Pai, Zoom has 200 million DAUs now. They had 10 million in December. SpaceX has banned it on security privacy concerns. How much do you share those?
We're always concerned about consumer privacy. We work very closely with the Federal Trade Commission, of course, which has primary jurisdiction over privacy issues when it comes to the internet economy. And I've, of course, been following some of the privacy issues that have been raised as consumers migrate to some of these online platforms. And that's one of the things we want to make sure is that although the connectivity is great in terms of giving people a connection to the outside world, we also want to make sure that some of their personal information is protected. And so the FCC has taken steps from everything from online platform usage to robocalls to make sure that consumers are aware that their personal information is important, it's going to be protected, and that we all have a stake in making sure that privacy is maintained.
Chairman, you mentioned robocalls, and that leads me to ask, complaints about fraud, are those up? Are there new types that you're seeing out there that the public should be aware of?
Unfortunately, the fraudsters follow the headlines just like anybody else, and we have seen a number of fraud-related robocalls, scam calls, and scam texts. In fact, if you go to the FCC's website, fcc.gov/consumers, you'll be able to find some sample audio and sample text in which robocallers have asked consumers for personal information, have suggested to them that there's a fake testing kit that can be sent to your home or a fake cure that's available if you just hand over some information. We want consumers to protect themselves by not answering a call if it's from a spoofed phone number, not handing over personal information and the like. In addition, I can't discuss publicly what we're doing on the enforcement side, but I can say that the FCC is very determined to be an aggressive cop on the beat at all times, and especially during a pandemic when those who wish consumers ill would prey upon them when they're at their most vulnerable.
Chairman, Carl just mentioned SpaceX, which is in the process of building out a satellite constellation for broadband service. One of its biggest rivals, OneWeb, a startup that was backed by the likes of SoftBank, just filed for bankruptcy a couple of days ago. Amid everything that's going on with coronavirus and the economic fallout right now, obviously a key priority for the FCC has been to close the digital divide and to increase connectivity, particularly in some of those hard-to-reach places like rural America. How concerned are you right now, given the circumstances, that some of these satellite efforts to boost connectivity are at risk?
That's a good question. One of the things that we've made it a hallmark of our administration the past few years is making sure we promote innovation in the broadband ecosystem. And that includes space, SpaceX, OneWeb, some of those other companies. Obviously, this is a difficult time for a lot of these providers, especially the nascent ones. But we're confident that companies like SpaceX, which is still launching satellites, and others will be able to provide an alternative in some parts of the country where the business case for terrestrial deployment is just too tough. We're consistently going to be monitoring that situation to make sure we do what we can in terms of relaxing regulations and the like, to encourage all these companies to continue to innovate. But it is a concern. And on the terrestrial side, I think it only underscores the importance of the FCC's efforts that I've talked about for a long time in making sure that we push ahead with some of our rural broadband initiatives. There are a lot of voices in Washington, for example, that want us to postpone the first phase of our Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. The first phase of that is a $16 billion fund to get broadband, high-speed, high-quality broadband to unserved parts of the country. I don't want to do that, especially when we've seen now that there are many parts of the country that really need that broadband connection in order to live their daily lives. So we're going to continue pushing ahead with vigor to make sure that people have the connections they need to participate in the economy despite some of these disruptions.